In today's video, we're going to go over the top 10 bass fishing tips and techniques that every fisherman needs to know, regardless of your skill level. Let's dive right in. Tip 1 is to become a knot tying pro. Before you ever head out into the water for a day of fishing, make sure you have tied the strongest and best knot possible. The last thing you want to have happen is to catch a lunker of a lifetime and lose them at the boat because your knot fails. We're going to show you how to tie the best knot possible. The best and easiest knot that Joe and I use is the uni knot. It's virtually indestructible, and in all my years of fishing, it has never failed us. We have a great tutorial on the channel on exactly how to tie the uni knot that we strongly suggest you check out. In fact, knot tying videos are among the most searched fishing videos on YouTube. So with a little bit of time and effort, you can find a good one out there pretty easily. So practice tying this knot over and over until you can tie it with your eyes closed or in your sleep. Practice tying it on the couch, watching football this winter, or out in the garage when you want to get a little fresh air. You don't have to be out on the water or in prime spring bass fishing season in April to pick this up. Tying the uni knot should become second nature to you before you ever pick up your fishing rod. The hatch for a better catch. And I'm not being Dr. Seuss. We're going to show you every tip you need for bait selection so you can catch more fish every time. So that phrase, match the hatch, is probably one of the most quoted sayings regarding bass fishing in history. But you'd be surprised how many beginner bass fishermen don't truly understand exactly what it means. No problem. That's what we're here for. We're going to show you and tell you everything you need to know for bait selection so that you can drastically improve your chances of catching more and bigger bass every time, no matter where you fish across the country. So, very simply, all this means is that you have to choose bait types and bait colors that closely resemble the forage and bait fish that the bass are actually eating in the body of water you are fishing. So, for example, if there are lots of crayfish in your lake, then maybe a soft tube bait is best in that same color. And if they're primarily eating shad, then maybe you go with a silver crankbait instead. You get the point. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. Just feed the bass what they are used to eating. It's not rocket science, and if you do this part right, I promise you, you will drastically improve how many more bass you begin catching, no matter where you fish.
Find the cover, find the bass. Just like in tip 2, if you find the cover, you're most likely going to find where the bass are hiding.
What better way to catch bass than to fish where the fish are? And every good bass fisherman knows that bass love structure, like fallen timber, logs, wood pilings, lily pads, docks, and submerged grass and vegetation. And the reason for this is really twofold. One is that it helps them hide there quietly so they can better ambush prey, but it's also because it protects them from hot, sunny days. And this type of structure also usually collects insects and also attracts bait fish, which of course the bass are after. So to be a better fisherman, you've got to be able to think like a fish. Whatever lake you're fishing in, just ask yourself, if I was a bass, where would I hide from predators and also find food while staying cooler? Then fish there. I bet you'll catch some nice bass in that spot.
Tip 4, you got to know the weather and you got to know the water temperature. Sometimes it just comes down to environmental factors out of our control.
Okay, so far we've covered tying the best knot possible so your bait stays on and helps you actually land the fish. We know what bait color and type of bait to use because we've patterned it after the natural food forage in your lake, and we found the bass's favorite hiding spots. Okay, so you've done all three of these things right so far, and they still aren't hitting. So what now? Well, that leads us to tip 4. Sometimes it just comes down to science. The actual weather outside and the water temperature of the lake that you are fishing are usually going to be the main points to consider when it comes to a bass's feeding activity or lack thereof. The temperature will affect a bass's metabolism as well as their general energy level. and it affects their desire to chase after food and how they actually digest that food and absorb the nutrients. Usually one of the best opportunities to go bass fishing is on cloudy days because the overcast skies actually cause them to be more active in looking for food than on bright sunny days. And it's also great fishing in lighter rain conditions too, because it causes insects and bugs to fall into the water. And you know, bass love to come to the surface to snare that type of stuff. And probably even more important than the weather conditions is the actual water temperature in your lake. Did you know that just a couple of degrees can make all the difference in the world in whether you catch fish or get skunked? If you didn't know, warmer water does not contain as much oxygen as cooler water, and bass, like most fish, are very sensitive to this. And it's generally true that 80% of the lake's bass are only found in about 20% of the actual lake. And that is because they're constantly on the move to not only find food and cover, like we've talked about, but also actively searching out cooler areas of the lake that have higher concentrations of oxygen.
Tip 5, early to bed, early to rise, fish all day and make up lies. Well, at least the first 3 are true. We're going to show you when the best time is to catch bass every day.
Tip 5 is to fish just before dawn and just before dusk to exponentially increase your chances of catching big bass and more bass every time. Early in the day and late in the day are usually always prime time fishing for bass and when they're typically most active in their feeding. Why is this? It's actually quite simple. Bass like to hunt for prey and feed more actively in low light environments. Just like we mentioned back in tip 4 about catching more fish on cloudy or even rainy days. Of course, you can still catch fish all throughout the day, but the 2 times generally bass are more active is in the morning and at night. So think about it. Bass are no different than us humans. Their biggest meals of the day are breakfast and dinner with a light salad for lunch. Makes total sense, right?
Tip 6, sharpen your hooks and go red. I'm going to show you how these tips will help you catch more fish.
Okay, tying into what we said in tip 1 about being a knot tying pro is making sure your fishing hooks are always sharp and you're replacing worn or dull hooks with blood red hooks and you're respooling your line on all your rods at least annually. Again, this is not rocket science that having extra sharp hooks will stay in the fish's mouth longer and better than dull hooks, but you'd be surprised how many bass are missed and lost every single day because the fisherman didn't take care of the basics before heading out on the water. So just make sure your sharp hooks are the best performing and your line is always on your bass fishing checklist before you head out the door. So why red hooks? That's because the color red is what the bass sees best and it mimics wounded or dying bait fish and will always trigger more strikes than any other color.
Tip 7 is to be adaptable. Just like our home lives, our school lives, our work lives, we have to be flexible and be able to change. You want to make sure you're changing colors, changing your fishing spots when fish aren't biting, as well as changing lure presentations.
So over the first 6 tips that we've covered so far, hopefully you've gained a better appreciation that the largemouth bass can be finicky, and in order to maximize your chances of catching bass more regularly and consistently, you got to be willing to change things up. You have to be willing to adapt and adjust your tactics to changing conditions all around you, weather, water, and of course, paying close attention to the bass's activity and feeding patterns. Doing all these things well means you will always up your chances of having more success out on the water.
Now for the fun part of bass fishing. It's all in the cast.
In order to significantly increase your chances of catching more bass every time, you need to become a casting pro, and that is to be able to precisely place your bait within a foot of where you want it casted so you can better target where the fish actually are. This is especially true if you're using a bait caster and skipping soft plastics underneath a winding tree or in between docks so you don't get snagged up. Getting better at casting accurately not only puts you on the fish better, it will help eliminate or reduce the number of birds' nests and backlashes you get in your bait caster reel. Time your reel gets messed up, it just becomes frustrating and takes time away from why you're actually there, and that is catching monster bass.
Tip Tip 9, the wind can be your friend. We're going to show you how to catch more bass, knowing a lot more about the wind.
You always want to fish with the wind in your face because bass and fish in general swim with the current. So it'll be much easier for them to find the bait you're throwing. And another key reason you want to be aware of wind direction when bass fishing is that it will make the bait fish more active because the wind stirs up and moves their food supply all over the lake. So obviously when the bait fish become more active, so do the bass.
Okay, tip 10, last tip, the 2 P's, patience and persistence.
So the final tip is one you can use not only while fishing for finicky bass, but also in your daily lives. That is, practice patience and don't overreact or quit when the fishing gets tough. Remember tip 7 about being flexible and adaptable. So try new lakes, talk to folks at your local bait shops about who's catching what and where and on what. Follow the weather reports and read up on new lakes you might want to try this winter. Above all else, keep fishing fun, which is the whole key. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you out on the lake.
Okay, folks, thanks for watching. Please like this video, hit the subscribe button before you leave, and don't forget to enable your bell notifications so you never miss another great video coming your way.